Hello, everyone. Welcome to SCE Spotlight, a segment where we interview some SCE members and alumni, and they give their advice and insight. I'm Tiffany, and this is Ryan, an AI engineer at Mintlify and an SCE and SJSU alumni. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, how's it going?
Thank you for being here today. So let's get started into where you are currently. Since January, you have been a software engineer at Mintlify, a startup funded by Y Combinator in 2022. How'd you end up at Mintlify? What drew you to the company, and what was their hiring process like?
Yeah, so I ended up at Mintlify because I met the co-founder. She reached out to me a couple months ago, back in like August when like the semester just basically started. She was kind of just like telling me about the company and why it was better than like big tech in general, and she was trying to convince me in an interview. I was on the fence about it, and then we ended up she helped sponsor SCE hacks that happened sometime last year, like I think October. And after that, I was like, wow, this is like she's really cool. And yeah, I decided to apply and interviewed. In terms of the hiring process, there's a couple different parts of our hiring process. We kind of pride ourselves on not doing leak code style interviews because they're not really effective in determining if someone is like going to be a good software engineer. So we have like very much like practical interviews. So for example, there's like a debugging round where you are given a segment of our code base, and you have to figure out like what's wrong with them and fix the bugs. Another part of our interview is like a spec assessment, which is essentially like they give you a problem that we're working on. Like imagine a customer asks for a feature and they essentially just give you like this. It's a very broad problem, and you just have to work through it with the people you're interviewing with, and you have to write out this document, a spec essentially, and then you have to present it to the team and get buy-in. So these are like very practical interview rounds that we give, and we kind of just try to gauge if someone is going to be a good member on the team or not.
Is that like a widespread practice across the industry?
I don't think so. I think it's very much becoming like a popular interview technique for startups specifically because they really want to gauge if you can be like a productive team member, not like if yeah. Everyone understands like um, software engineering interviews in terms of like leak code interviews are not super effective, if that makes sense. Like they're very you can very much study for those, and it's nice to be able to study for those, but they're not like super. It's not a good proxy for seeing if someone is going to be good, if that makes sense.
Right. There's so many ways to prepare for those now, and
Yeah.
there's so many other metrics
Mhm.
that we need to measure
Exactly.
for a good employee. Now I'd like to ask, so one reason you were able to join Mitlify was because of your previous internship experience, which was the summer of 2025 at Amazon. What was that experience like? And as someone who is working in big tech before Mitlify, what was a big adjustment going from big tech to startup?
I see. So the biggest difference in the interview process was big tech was very there was a very standard interview. It was just one round of lead code, one round of behaviorals, and it didn't really feel connected at all. I interviewed with someone that worked in Seattle, and like I never met that guy while I was at the company because they have like 30, 50,000 engineers or something. So it was very disconnect, and it was like very much it didn't feel like a team, and I didn't know who I was going to be joining, and that's just normal across the industry. That's perfectly okay. The biggest adjustment from going to big tech to startups, I think, is like the amount of ownership that you're expected to have. So, for example, like at my during my summer at Amazon, like my mentor technically owned my entire project. So he like got buy-in from my manager. He talked to my manager about how the project's going to go, and then I kind of just had to do the work. While here, I'm also like I'm very much allowed to voice my opinions about my my work and determine like the way that it's supposed to go. And I just have a lot more like ownership here, so I'm allowed to be more open about how I feel things should be, like what the product should feel like, etc. If that makes sense.
So yeah, everyone has more agency and more like a bigger role in
Yeah.
yeah, production.
Yeah.
And for someone who's in a situation that has to choose between big tech and startups,
Yes.
what advice would you give to them?
Um, this is really hard. Um, I've been thinking about this a lot too recently because they're very two different they're very two different experiences. One will feel much more just like a regular job, and then like working here also kind of I very much incorporated this job into my life, where it's like it's not just I get to clock out and just go do whatever. I kind of have to own. I own my stuff. So if something breaks or if something goes down, like I'm responsible for bringing it back up and making sure that it's working for our customers and stuff. Yeah, it really comes down to like what you want in life. If you view software engineering as I just want it to be a job, and albeit you could still love engineering and still want it to be a job, you should definitely go with big tech. But if you really, really like software engineering, you like the idea of like owning products, talking to customers, making sure that everything is good, and like just having that ownership at agency, you should definitely go with the startup.
Well, you're definitely a very adaptive person. As you can see, you've been on like both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So, in the past couple of years, the tech landscape has changed a lot, and AI is at like the forefront of all of that. So, in your experience, what aspect of software engineering has changed the most since you got into CS and as a result of AI?
This is gonna be sound very cliche, but I think it's just like the most popular and the truest opinion. Implementation details matter less and less, and it really comes down to judgment. If you are able to read an LLM's outputs and determine like, hey, this is good, hey, this is bad, and decide from there, like your level of or your ability to judge something as good and bad matters so much more now. Because LLMs can produce like amazing code, but they can also not produce amazing code, and you need to be able to distinguish between the two. That's the biggest difference. It is not so much about like understanding the nitty gritty details anymore. Like AI has become this layer, this abstraction layer where it's not really about writing code, it's about like designing systems and choosing good patterns, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it gets rid of like, syntax problems and, leaves you with more space to,
Exactly.
yeah, figure out the system yourself. So, so how has this changed how students should approach career building and learning, in your opinion?
I think now with like the idea of designing systems in mind, there's you should definitely be able to program decently well. The fundamentals still matter because the fundamentals help you build like the bigger, better, I guess, bigger skills. But you should definitely be approaching it in terms of like expanding the breadth of things you know as much as possible. There's two ways you can go about this. You can either one explore a path super deeply and like really really understand something. So for example, like if you're really into machine learning, you learn everything about machine learning. You learn all the different models, all the different training techniques, how to do distributed training. um or you could do like the breadth approach where you just learn a lot of different things because you're able to learn things so much faster. What this looked like for me when I was in school was like attending hackathons and trying to build with as many different technologies as possible. um and I had like a framework that I would break projects down into, and using that framework I would figure out a problem that I wanted to solve, go out there, like find the different frameworks, find the different technologies, and then use AI to help me leverage, like help me learn all of them quickly, and also just like learn different parts of software engineering.
Yeah, AI has definitely made like learning different technologies a lot more accessible because
Exactly.
so now you were a student until very recently, and this interview is hosted by SCE. So
Yeah.
we do want to ask, what was your state of your career before SCE, and how did SCE help advance your career?
I Honestly speaking, I did not have a great experience at SJSU before I joined SCE. I felt very like disjoint from like the computer science community at SJSU, and joining SCE helped me find that community, but it also helped me find people that like pushed me to be better than I currently was, which was the biggest thing. Like constantly being around people that strive to be better also helped me strive to be better, and that was like the biggest factor in helping me accelerate my growth.
Yeah, I'm sure everything just like fell into place after
Yeah, it
yourself.
realistically it clicked right after I joined, which is good.
What skills, technical or not, did you learn through SCE, your SCE experience, and that you would not have learned in classes, and that you also still apply in daily life or career?
Um, that's hard. I just met a lot of people in SE, and there's so many different people in SE, and they have all these different backgrounds. So like meeting all these people was probably one of the best skills that I learned. Being a good listener and like knowing when to shut up and listen to people who might know more than you and like are trying to teach you something is really nice. There's a lot of like really good engineers still in SE, and everyone is pretty nice in there. So if you ask them for help with something, or if you want help with the project or something, they're very open to helping.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like, in a way, one would say networking, like practice you
Definitely.
can do in there, definitely. How much did you think classes actually helped you in your career? And along those lines, how much time do you think students should be investing in those classes relative to their career?
Uh, yeah, this is like one of the unfortunate things about artificial intelligence. Like AI is rapidly it's outpacing the speed at which classes can teach you. Unfortunately, like I used to be a really big um advocate for school, but now it's becoming harder and harder to justify. And realistically, if you are a computer science in like nowadays, or a computer science student nowadays, you should definitely be investing more time outside of class. Do the minimum effort to hit like your goals for school. So whether that be like a GPA or exam scores or whatever, like do put minimum effort into that and invest as much time as you can into learning skills outside of your classes, because there is absolutely no way that classes will be able to keep up with the things that you learn outside of class. So by not investing time in doing projects and like learning different technologies and stuff that your classes will likely never teach you, you are missing out and you are losing in like this race
So, also along those lines, if you could go back to your first day of college, what would your one piece advice be to yourself?
to join SCE. To join
Okay.
SCE, but also like, and yeah, like I would be following my own advice. I had some really bad advice my first couple years of college, where I have an uncle in tech and he's been in tech for a very long time, and I understood the concept of internships. Like, oh, you spend a couple times or sorry, a couple months at a company and you learn, um, their practices and engineering and like whatever. And he was like, "Oh, you should just wait. Like most students get their internships their third year." And that was like the worst advice that he ever gave me, because fact of the matter is, there are definitely ways to get internships and experience your first and second year, and the snowball effect from your first and second year like compounds into your later years of college, and it matters so much more nowadays. Um, so if I could give myself advice, like I would do what I did my third and fourth year, but I would do it in my first and second year. That makes sense.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for being here,
Yeah.
Ryan. And yeah, thank you for everyone watching. Hope you guys
Yeah.
have a nice day.
Good luck, everyone.